Across Europe, hidden behind rusted gates and forests that have crept too close, stand forgotten buildings. For over a century, they held society's most vulnerable people. These are the abandoned asylums, the collapsed psychiatric hospitals, the institutions where silence was enforced and suffering was a daily routine. Most were closed decades ago, left to crumble into the earth. Yet visitors say the buildings have not become quiet. They say they whisper, they move, they remember. This is an exploration of Europe's most terrifying abandoned asylums, where the echoes of a dark past still cling to the walls, and sometimes they answer back. From the late 1800s to the mid-20th century, a dark era of mental health care unfolded within these institutions. Asylums were overcrowded, understaffed, and often profoundly cruel. Patients, many of whom were not mentally ill but simply inconvenient to their families, were subjected to horrific treatments. Electroshock therapy without anesthesia, prolonged ice baths designed to shock the system into submission, early crude lobotomy experiments that left patients permanently disabled. They were confined in restraint chairs for days and locked away in pitch-black isolation rooms. For many, these asylums were not a place of healing, but a final destination. The buildings that remain today are not just decaying structures, they are architectural crime scenes, still holding the last breaths of thousands of forgotten souls. Our journey begins in Colchester, England, at the site of Severall's Asylum. Opened in 1913, it was designed with a seemingly progressive village layout, complete with charming cottages. But behind this pleasant facade, the reality was bleak. Survivor accounts, pieced together from historical records, reveal a horrifying picture. Untrained staff with no medical background were left to perform their own brand of psychiatry. Experimental shock therapy was common, often used as punishment rather than treatment. Patients who were deemed difficult were locked in darkness for days, sometimes weeks on end. Severall's was officially shut down in 1997, but its story didn't end there. Urban explorers who venture inside its decaying walls describe unsettling phenomena. The distinct sound of screams echoing through empty corridors' doors, slamming shut in wings that have been sealed for decades, and fleeting apparitions of figures in old-fashioned nurses' uniforms. Locals living nearby claim the building still breathes at night, a silent, ominous presence on the edge of town. Next, we travel to Italy, to one of the country's most infamous abandoned psychiatric hospitals, Ospedale Psichiatrico di Volterra. At its peak, this sprawling complex housed over 6,000 patients under some of the most brutal conditions imaginable. The recorded horrors are difficult to comprehend. Patients were chained directly to their beds or even the walls. Forced labor was a standard part of their daily routine. Lobotomies were performed without consent, often with crude instruments, leaving a trail of human devastation. The hospital was forced to close in 1978, following a new law that reformed Italy's mental health care system. But the building itself has never been at peace. Paranormal investigators and urban explorers report profoundly disturbing activity. Wheelchairs moving on their own down long, empty hallways. Whispering voices heard coming from the decrepit isolation cells. And most chillingly, the repeated sighting of a tall shadow figure that seems to follow visitors from room to room. The graffiti on the walls, etched by the patients themselves, remains untouched, a permanent, silent testament to the anguish that saturated this place. In Germany, we find the Gringen Asylum, a place with a history so dark it transcends even the usual horrors of these institutions. During the Second World War, this asylum became a key site in Germany's T4 euthanasia program. Under this directive, individuals deemed unworthy of life, the disabled, the mentally ill, were systematically murdered. Many of the victims were children. Today, the asylum stands empty, but its legacy of death clings to every surface. Visitors report experiences that are both heartbreaking and terrifying. Small, ghostly handprints appearing on dusty windows, only to vanish moments later. The unmistakable sound of children crying emanating from the long-abandoned children's wing, and sudden, inexplicable cold spots that materialize in hallways where so much tragedy unfolded. Historical records confirm that more than 1,800 people died here, their lives cut short by a monstrous ideology. Just outside Glasgow, Scotland, lie the ruins of Lennox Castle Hospital. Originally built as a stately home, it was converted into a vast institution for people with physical and learning disabilities. It became a byword for neglect and cruelty. Overcrowding was so severe that patients were often left to their own devices, wandering freezing halls with no supervision. Children were routinely sedated with powerful drugs, not for therapeutic reasons, but simply to make them more manageable for the overwhelmed staff. Since its final closure, explorers brave enough to navigate its crumbling structure report a chilling consistency in their experiences. The sound of unseen footsteps running down the corridor of the children's ward. Disembodied whispers that seem to come from just behind locked doors. And perhaps most unnerving of all, the faint sound of dozens of voices humming an indistinguishable tune in unison. Many who have visited believe the hospital as past trauma became so intense that it never truly left. In Belgium, we find Vilvoorde Asylum, a fortress-like building known for its oppressive design and underground cells. It was built specifically to restrain those classified as the dangerously insane. Its architecture speaks to its purpose: thick walls, heavy iron doors, and subterranean rooms designed for total isolation. Those who have dared to enter its suffocating darkness report a range of terrifying phenomena. The sound of heavy, labored breathing in completely empty rooms, fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures crawling across the floors in the peripheral vision, and the discovery of rusted restraints still attached to the walls where they were last used decades ago. The local police don't just warn trespassers away because of the building's structural instability. They warn them because of its intense documented psychological effect on those who spend too much time inside. Deep in rural France, we come to a place known as Trict Cosin Almerol. In the 19th century, this imposing institution served a dual purpose as both an asylum and a prison, blurring the lines between patient and prisoner. Historical records paint a grim picture of life within its walls. Patients were routinely starved, their meager food rations often withheld as a form of punishment. It was a place where families abandoned relatives they could no longer care for, leaving them to an uncertain fate. During the harsh winters, dozens died of hypothermia, their suffering ignored by the staff. Modern paranormal investigators have captured evidence here that is difficult to dismiss. On audio recordings, loud, frantic knocking can be heard coming from inside cells that have been sealed for over a century. The distinct sound of a woman crying has been recorded behind a heavy, bolted door. And on one occasion, a photograph captured a dark, human-like shape standing in an upper-floor window. long after dark, in a section of the building that is completely inaccessible. Despite being in different countries with different medical systems, a disturbing pattern emerges from the paranormal claims of these asylums. Unrested dead, apparitions of former patients or staff, unexplained sound phenomena like screams, whispers, and footsteps, the consistent appearance of shadow figures in the darkest corners, and an overwhelming feeling of residual energy, a psychic stain left behind by extreme trauma. Whether these phenomena are truly supernatural or the profound psychological weight of immense human suffering manifesting in our minds, one fact is clear. These buildings did not become silent simply because they were abandoned. So why do these asylums seem to be such powerful hotspots for paranormal activity? Researchers propose several compelling theories. The first is the emotional imprint theory, which suggests that intense trauma can leave a permanent energetic mark on a location, like a psychic scar. Then there's the echo phenomenon, also known as the stone tape theory, where powerful events are believed to repeat over and over, like a ghostly recording playing on a loop. Another theory points to lingering consciousness, suggesting that individuals who died in a state of confusion, terror, or restraint may still wander the halls, their consciousness unable to move on. Finally, there's the concept of architectural memory. The thick stone and brick walls that make up these institutions are thought to absorb and retain sound, temperature changes, and emotional energy over many decades. Scientists cannot verify these theories, but the sheer volume of similar experiences reported by explorers across an entire continent is hard to ignore. It's crucial to acknowledge the real dangers of exploring these locations. Many people who enter these decaying asylums, even seasoned urban explorers, report a host of disturbing effects that linger long after they've left. Sudden, unexplained waves of nausea, overwhelming panic attacks that seem to come from nowhere, and a deeply unsettling feeling of being followed for days, even weeks after a visit. Some report vivid nightmares of the rooms they explored, reliving the oppressive atmosphere in their sleep. Whether you believe in the paranormal or not, these buildings have a tangible, measurable effect on people. Their history is so heavy, so saturated with pain, that even the most skeptical visitors often leave feeling deeply changed. In the end, Europe's abandoned asylums are far more than just decaying ruins or destinations for thrill seekers. They are time capsules of suffering. They are monuments to a time of medical ignorance and fear. And most importantly, they are stark reminders of how human beings were treated when society did not understand them. The whispers heard in these halls today may not be ghosts in the traditional sense. They may be memories trapped in the very fabric of the buildings. But as countless witnesses will tell you, whatever lies inside these walls, it still wants to be heard. Thank you for watching. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please know that help is available and you are not alone. Resources are listed in the description below.